The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Those of you who don't know me very well, and unfortunately that's probably most of us here, might not know that I grew up in a family with 7 children. I'm number 6 of 7. My poor parents. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of joy, there was a lot of fun, but there were difficulties, as are found in every family, I think. I had 4 older sisters. 4 older sisters. So there was a lot of drama. 2 brothers, one older and one younger. And there was a lot of sibling rivalry and competition between us. That was happening all the time. We had only one bathroom in the house. Yes. So as I look back on those days, to tell you the truth, I can't remember what that bathroom actually looked like. I spent so little time in it. I just don't have a memory of it. And I always cherish those memories because with its ups and downs, it was an experience that we were able to get through, and our characters were built, at least in part, on those experiences. And I think those of you who were raised in families, I think virtually all of us were, especially larger families, hopefully can appreciate that. So I wanted to tell you that about myself. And it relates to our first reading. Now, we've got some interesting readings, 3 of them. We got one from Genesis, we've got one from Romans, and we got one from the Gospel according to Matthew. And I'm going to touch a little bit on each one. And I'm even going to toss out to you a few Greek words. I'm going to do that. I'm going to toss some Greek words out to you and see if anybody bites on them. If you do, great. If you don't, that's fine. But let's take a look at our first reading from Genesis. We have a very large family, Jacob and Rachel and all of their children. We have 11 sons that are mentioned in that family, and one of them is Joseph. Joseph, the youngest one. I think we've all heard of Joseph, have we not? From Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, his coat of many colors. Joseph is one of the better known figures of the Old Testament, I think. And his brothers. Now, there was a great deal of drama. There was a great deal of rivalry, conflict, and fighting. And unfortunately, tragically, this was some pretty severe stuff, more than you would find in families in general. The scriptures indicate that some of Joseph's brothers hated him. Hated him. And that's a strong word, and it's difficult to even think about, but there was hatred within this family. And I think it was based not just on rivalry, but a deep sense of jealousy. A deep sense of jealousy. You see, Joseph was special. He was gifted in a unique way. He could interpret dreams. He could interpret dreams, which at that time was a very significant thing. It was extremely valuable. It was invaluable in many instances because people at that time believed that God spoke through dreams, that messages of importance were conveyed through dream material. But as we all know, all of us who have dreamed, dreams don't really necessarily give you a direct message. Specifically, do this, don't do that, or at such and such a time something is going to happen, so be aware of it. Dreams are more symbolic. Even the language, if there is language used in our dreams, tends to be symbolic language. And it requires interpretation because we're wondering, okay, what was this dream that I just woke up from about? And that's where the dream interpreters come in. And the dream interpreters also were helpful in instances where things were seen, mysterious visions with ambiguous meaning to them or unknown meaning to them. I'm thinking in particular of the writing on the wall vision that was seen later in the Old Testament that had to be interpreted by someone else who had the ability to do that. So these types of folks were very valuable and esteemed. And what happened with Joseph, as we may know from our previous acquaintance with his story, is that later on the ruler of Egypt is impressed by him and invites him to be a part of his staff because of his ability to interpret the dreams that the ruler of Egypt was having. And so anyway, the brothers of Joseph didn't like this, and they got jealous, they got mad, they wanted to get rid of him. They threw him in a pit thinking that he would just die down there, and then they thought, well, why don't we just bring him out of the pit and sell him off as a slave to foreigners who are nearby? And so that's what they do. That's pretty dirty. That's pretty low down and dirty. I don't see how it could get even worse than that. Well, if you read later on in Genesis, you'll find that eventually things do get ironed out. And there is reconciliation that happens. This isn't the end of the story. And that's kind of how it is in many of our families. Over time, things do get ironed out in a way. But I want to come back to this thing about dreams. I want to talk about visions. I want to talk about spiritual experiences that people in the days of the Bible had, people throughout the centuries had, and I believe that we have or can have as well. Indigenous people, in the indigenous cultures of Native American people, you find a belief in spirits that are a part of that person's life. It's a part of ordinary life. It's almost routine to have an encounter with a spirit or an apparition of some sort and to get some kind of a message from that entity or that being. I've had those conversations quite a bit with the indigenous people that I know, and they'll say something like, oh yeah, this morning there was a spirit in my kitchen. There was a spirit in my kitchen. Or last week there was a spirit in my backyard that I saw. And sometimes these apparitions or these visions are a little frightening and they're a little concerned about it, but sometimes not. Sometimes they refer to it quite casually, like it's a part of everyday life. I think there's something to that. I do. Unfortunately, in our dominant society, we are taught not to pay attention to those things, that they're figments of our imagination, or maybe they're hallucinations, there's something wrong with us in the category of a mental disorder, or they're categorized as evil, that they're not good, that harm can come from them. These are like demon figures that we might see or encounter. I don't think it's necessarily a good deal to dismiss all of this. Now, there is such a thing as hallucinations. They do happen for medical reasons, but that's not the same thing. I think that these are ways that we can encounter in this life and in our world, the spiritual world, the eternal, crossing over from the earthly to the heavenly. I believe that this is possible and that it has happened and can happen to any one of us. Let's take a look at our gospel reading from Matthew. Jesus just finished teaching a large group of people, and he performed the miracle of the feeding of several thousand individuals, men, women, and children. And he's dismissing the crowd. It's the end of the day. He tells the disciples to get into a boat and go over to the other side of the sea. Presumably he will meet them there on the other side. And so they do that. And this is, I think, the Sea of Galilee that they're referring to. The Sea of Galilee is about the size of Mille Lacs. A little smaller, I think, than Mille Lacs. So it's not big, it's not huge, but it can take some time to cross, especially if the weather is not good and the waves come in and toss a boat around. And that's what happens in this situation, as we've heard it from our gospel reading. Jesus isn't around, he's praying, and the disciples start to get concerned about the boat getting tossed around. They're anxious, they're fearful. And then in the night, they have this vision. They see Jesus walking to them on the water. That's what they see. Their initial reaction is to cry out with fear. It is a ghost, they said. They don't know what this is. This appearance is not one of Jesus, at least initially. It's mysterious. It's a mysterious figure. Now, the Greek word for ghost, that's translated into English as ghost here, the Greek word in the original New Testament is phantasma. Phantasma. The disciples see this phantasma before them out on the sea. Now, phantasma is the word that we have, that we get in English. An English translation of it is phantom, or fantasy, or fantastic, those types of words. In other words, this is something that is extraordinary, something that you don't encounter in the life that we're used to living. And they're not sure what to think of it. So they're paralyzed by fear. And then Jesus tells them, he reassures them, do not be afraid, it is I. But there's still some doubt there. Now, Peter says, Lord, if it is you, he's still not sure that that's Jesus, but he says, Lord, if it is you, command me to come out of the boat and meet you. And so Jesus says, come. And Peter does that, and as he sees the wind, or as he sees the waves and feels the wind, he panics and he begins to sink and says, "Lord, save me." And Jesus saves him from sinking. I think that the point of this story is not so much that Jesus can walk on water, as it is that Jesus is the spiritual guide for us between the earthly and the heavenly, between the temporal and the eternal. When Jesus comes out to see the disciples, he is spirit at that point. They don't recognize him. They don't know who he is or what he is. So he has been transformed in a spiritual way. Now, Peter, when he tries to go out and meet him, he's trying to cross over that barrier from the earthly to the heavenly, from the temporal to the eternal. And he's not able to do it because he's so focused on what's happening with the waves and the wind that he can't see the spiritual that's there. And so he begins to sink. That's what we're seeing here with Jesus. Just as Joseph was someone who was able to interpret dreams and find the spiritual meaning inside of them, Jesus is the one who is our interpreter and our instructor about the things eternal, the things heavenly, the things about the kingdom of God, the things of God. And the disciples, at the end of this experience, they interpret it as Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is the Son of God. That's the conclusion they come to as a result of this experience. That's the interpretation. Now I want to take us into the reading from Romans, what Paul says there. What do we have here? Well, all over this reading we have Jesus, 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 saved, 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 saves, saved. Jesus saves. We've heard that before. Well, what does that mean? First of all, another Greek word that I want to throw out to you. Jesus' name was not Jesus. Just wrap your mind around that a little bit. And some of us already know this, but Jesus' real name was Yeshua. Yeshua. Because he was Jewish and he lived in a community that spoke Aramaic, which is a dialect of Hebrew. He went by the name Yeshua, which is the Aramaic for the Hebrew Joshua. Joshua. And so in Hebrew, Joshua was Jesus' name. Now, the name Jesus is a Greek variation of Yeshua or Joshua. And because the New Testament was written in Greek, we have Jesus, rather than the name that he went by his entire life. Now, the name Yeshua or Joshua means God is salvation or God saves. God is salvation or God saves. And when you think about it, that's quite fitting from our understanding of Jesus, that would be the meaning of his name, of who he is. Now, there were a few different ways of interpreting the word save, as we have it here. The word save, sozo, is the word in Greek. Now, it can mean to rescue. It can mean to heal. Sozo can do that. To heal. It can mean to set free. And it can also mean to rescue from unbelief. To rescue from unbelief. It's another understanding of it. And I want to go with that one, that third one, to rescue from unbelief. So, as Paul says in Romans, if you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved or rescued from unbelief. For one believes with the heart and so is justified, and one confesses with the mouth and so is saved, rescued from unbelief. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved, rescued from unbelief. And what does it mean to be rescued from unbelief? It means to be able to see that there is a spiritual realm, that there is a spiritual life, and that that spiritual realm or life is accessible to us. Following the teachings of Jesus as our guide, as our interpreter, we can live within the kingdom of God, right here, right now, every day. Yes, it is possible. Yes, it can happen. Yes, it does happen. But so often, aren't we, we're taught, don't believe in that mumbo jumbo. Don't talk about it if you've seen anything or experienced anything. It's not safe, and we're taught to stuff it. Well, I would say to you, don't stuff it. I believe that God does communicate with us in many different ways, from the spiritual crossing into the earthly, into our lives. And that's done in the way that it's happened with our spiritual ancestors for centuries, for millennia, through dreams, through visions, through things that we see, through mysterious encounters that we might have, that we don't understand, and through other people in ways that we might not be expecting. Jesus lives, and this is how that happens. Have you experienced God in your life? If so, how would you describe it? What would you say about it? Or maybe it's something that you don't feel you can talk about. Maybe you're uncertain, maybe you're afraid. Well, as Jesus said to Peter and the disciples on the sea, don't be afraid. It is I. And if God is really trying to communicate with us and interact with us, there is nothing to fear if it's genuinely of God. Are we ready for something like this? Maybe some of us have experienced it already. But if we haven't, are we ready? Are we ready to meet Jesus? Are we ready to conclude that Jesus is the Son of God?